Today on the We Invested podcast, we have serial entrepreneur Mark Rockwell, and he is the founder of Coach Rockwell. Mark, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. We were having a really great conversation before we started recording, so I'm looking forward to this episode.
I am as well.
Yes, sir. So let's just jump right into it. What is Coach Rockwell?
Well, Coach Rockwell is the name that I chose when I decided, after selling my healthcare business, that I wanted to work with emerging companies and help them really grow and scale up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, how would you define a business coach or an entrepreneurial coach?
Well, that could take a variety of forms. In my situation, what I do specifically is work with emerging companies that have what I would call hit the ceiling, meaning they've started off. Oftentimes, businesses are started by entrepreneurs who are very high energy, typically pretty smart. Hopefully, they have a good product or service, and they just scramble like mad. But at some point, after they've gotten 4, 5, 8, 10, 20 employees, they realize they've hit the ceiling. They don't have any processes, they don't have any systems. And when they started off, they had a good product and they had a couple, three really good employees, and everybody kept everything in their head. But that only works up to a certain point, and you realize pretty quickly this is starting to get out of control. So, what I do is work with firms, generally speaking, that have at least 10, 12, 15 employees, probably doing $2 to $3 million a year in business, and help them really just get organized, focus and organize.
For sure, for sure. And so, you kind of hit on this a little earlier, but how did you get started in this space?
It's really interesting, and it's caused me to use a phrase that I say is embrace wisdom wherever you find it. And interestingly enough, I became introduced to what was called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, by a young man that I had been mentoring for 10 years. And we would meet for breakfast several times a year. And one morning he came to breakfast and he brought a book called Traction. And he knew I was an avid reader. And he said, "Hey, Mark, here's a book I think you'd like." Well, we talked about it and it sounded pretty interesting. So I went back to my office, and unlike the olden days where you'd write a name of a book down and put it in your pocket and hope you didn't lose it, I went straight back to my office and got on the Amazon website and ordered the book. And then I knew that when I got the book, I'd better not put it on my stack of unread books because it would be months before I got to it. And I knew this fellow was going to say, "Hey, what did you think?" So I read the book, was really impressed by it. It made a lot of sense. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, Derek, that's a really good book." And he said, "Did you really like it?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I really did. It really had some profound ideas in it." So then he went on to say, "Well, would you like to meet the man that's helping us implement it in my company?" And so I said, "Absolutely." So long story short, Wesley, is we met his implementer. We implemented EOS in my healthcare company, which we were about 600 employees at the time. And over the next 18 months to 2 years, we could see some profound difference, some profound improvements, some clarity, some accountability. And so when I sold the majority of that company, I decided that I had no interest in retiring. And so I decided I would go on the road, so to speak, and help other emerging companies implement the same process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, how would you say that your previous business experiences and entrepreneurial experiences have helped to prepare you for, your current company that you have today?
Well, I think the reality is that having lived through uh, a variety of businesses, from transportation to real estate to healthcare, what I've learned to recognize, obviously, and this is, I guess you could call it a no brainer, maybe I'm just a slow learner, is that there are common challenges in virtually every business. And one of the basic challenges of every business is you need to focus. If there is one word of wisdom I would give to anybody, is it's spelled Focus, focus. And in a modern society with all kinds of electronics and devices and our ability to bob and weave and respond quickly, we as human beings have deluded ourselves into thinking that we can multitask. I read a good quote not long ago that goes something like this: multitasking is the opportunity to do multiple things miserably all at the same time. And I have learned that for a fact. And most businesses, most entrepreneurs fall into the trap of feeling as though they can do multiple things all at the same time. And that's out of necessity because they've never, ever bothered to actually get organized. And I use a corny illustration, but it makes the point. It's like two fellas start a business and they go to a trade show and they come back from the trade show and they've got 10 business cards and they throw them in a box. And you walk in and say, "Hey, where's Jack's contact information?" And I scramble and say, right, it's right here. It's right here. And you're so proud of me and I'm so proud of myself that I found it right away. But you go forward 5 years and now there are 5,500 cards in the box and they've never been organized. And you walk in and ask for a card or somebody's contact information. I scramble around and get all sweaty and angry. And 30 minutes later, I can't find it. That is a metaphorical explanation of how most young businesses are. It works early. You throw 10 cards in a box, not a problem. You have a young company, you know every part, you know every employee, you know every check, you know every customer. That doesn't roll forward and scale, though, when you've got more parts, more products, more employees, more locations. And quite honestly, many businesses are just like that unorganized card box. It's just mayhem. And so what happens then, and this is kind of the wake up call, Wesley. This is typical of a wake up call where a customer calls up one day and they say, "Wesley, I just want to give this to you in the kindest way possible. We've been your customer now for 6 years and your service has been really great. But I just have to tell you, the last couple orders have really gotten messed up. And I know that you really pride yourself on good service, but there's something going on in your organization because I'm fearful you've reached a tipping point. And suddenly you as an owner and a business entrepreneur go, oh, something's wrong because I'm working hard. Everybody else is working hard. But clearly, our customer, who we really like and appreciate, is no longer as happy as he used to be. And that is when, oftentimes, or something similar to that, is the reality of we need to get organized. And it isn't just a matter of pedaling harder, and it isn't a matter of working more hours, and it isn't a matter of just adding more employees. It's who are we? What are we? What are we doing? Who's our customer? What is our core value? What are we hiring for? What kind of person are we trying to hire? And it just takes it back to the basics. So that's what I try to help people with.
Yes, sir, for sure, for sure. And those are definitely some important, very vital, you know, pieces to having a successful business. It's understanding what the vision is and what the core values are. But in your opinion, what would you say the importance is of a company having that vision and having that core value in line, like you just mentioned?
So that's an interesting and a really worthwhile question, and I will tell you the term vision and core values sounds so stuffy and so inanimate to most people. It's kind of like, oh, get over yourself. That's so pompous. Don't be talking to me about your core values. Nobody ever does anything with those anyway. And so let me clarify. I actually, quite honestly, I don't really like the term core values that well because of the fact that it is perceived, not that because it's wrong, but because it's perceived by many people incorrectly. So let me say, first of all, your vision, of course, is who are we and where are we going? And if you don't know who you are and where you're going, it's no different in business than if you were taking a trip and you're just confused and you're going in circles. When it comes to core values, I prefer to use the term core behaviors or core qualities. So, where does that apply? It's really important to have that for a variety of reasons clarified because it means these are the characteristics, these are the qualities that we want in every colleague that we hire. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I live here in the Northwest where there's a large tire company called Les Schwab, and their service is legendary. And if you pull into the parking lot, I can almost guarantee you that before you can get out of the car, some young person will come loping across the parking lot and say, "Well, good morning. How can I help you?" That's called hustle. So if hustle is an important core value, core quality, core behavior, you need to have identified it as something that you are looking for in every person you're hiring. Because if you don't identify hustle as something that is really important, trust me, as you grow, you're not going to be hiring people that have hustle because that's not something you were thinking about. So I always make it very clear with my clients that they need to identify three, not more than four core qualities, core behaviors, core, yeah, qualities or behaviors. And because if you make the list too long, you can no longer hire, fire, recognize, and reward. So it's only as you have three or four qualities that you're really hiring for, and you say, those are behaviors we want to see in myself and every one of my colleagues, does it become meaningful? If it's 20, it's like, oh, well, the list is too long to even emphasize. So that's kind of core qualities or core values. Just as an aside, real quickly, I think where people get confused is, well, isn't integrity, isn't honesty, isn't respect, aren't those important too? And the answer is those are not core qualities or core behaviors. Those are pay to play. Those are basic, essential qualities and values. So you need to differentiate between the basic honesty, integrity, respect, which are pay to play. Those are absolutely automatic and should be in a part of every company. And then you as an organization elevate, if you will, those three or four core behaviors that you want to hire for. It may be, for instance, in some companies, I know one young company I work with, one of their core values is own it. You need to own it. If you're going to work for this company, that is something we expect every colleague to own it. Now, that's not true in every organization. But in this particular organization, that is something that they absolutely want to make very clear for every associate that they hire, that they need to take on their job with the understanding that they are going to own the output. And not everyone's up for that, right? So, why is that important? When you have very clear core values, core behaviors, core qualities, it will attract people that you want, and it will serve to repel people that you don't want. If quote own it is an example, and somebody goes, I don't really want to do that, they are not going to accept the position. So it helps attract, and it also helps to detract or push away people that you probably don't want as a part of your team.
For sure, for sure. And that's a great kind of segue into my next question. So by really understanding the vision and the uh core qualities of your company, that will give you the chance to better communicate what it is that you're looking for, and kind of have guidelines and rules of what it is that you will and will not accept, or will not want to bring into your team. But what would you say are, the essentials for great communication?
Well, first of all, each of us, communication is so fundamental in any organization that it goes without saying that there probably isn't anything more important. And in fact, I'm probably not going to quote this correctly, but the thought goes something like this, that the basis for most disappointment are, are poorly communicated expectations. Now, I slaughtered that. That was really a rough statement. But the idea being, if I don't communicate to you clearly, Wesley, what it is I'm looking for, there's a high likelihood I am going to be disappointed. And I'm disappointed not because you're not a smart, capable, energetic person. I just didn't communicate it to you clearly. And that is, I know I see this all the time, and I'm guilty of it myself. We tend to talk in shortened sentences. We tend to talk in acronyms. We tend to talk in abbreviated letters that I have no clue what those, QMT means. To the person who's sending the message, they know what QMT means. I have never seen that definition. So then you try to divine what that means. And that's just a simple example of how it's not shocking how quickly communication can get garbled. Let me give you a visual. You're going to have to imagine this for a moment, but I think that everyone can understand this. So pretend now you're looking at a sheet of paper and there are two dots. It's you and me. And so we're communicating back and forth. So you got two dots and you got an arrow left and an arrow right. That's pretty simple communication, right? It's just two people back and forth. Now we're going to add a third person. So now it's a triangle. So we got an arrow between you and me. We got an arrow from you down to this new person. And we've got an arrow from the new person back to me. So now we've got arrows going in three different directions, or three different arrows going in bidirectional. So we have added one person, but we have 200% more communication going on. Now add a fourth person. So now it's a square. You got four dots, and you've got arrows going in all different directions, diagonally, back and forth, up and down. We have gone from from two people to four people, but we now have 12 different lines of communication. And that's only four people. Right. And if any one of those arrows breaks, it's a ball drop. It means someone's going to go, well, I didn't know that. So you can see really quickly how communication, and I remember seeing that drawing several years ago and going, oh my gosh, that's really complex. You've got four people and there's all these opportunities for miscommunication. And now you extrapolate that out to 8, 10, 15, 20, 30 people. A 30-person organization isn't all that big, but think of the hundreds of different lines that are going back and forth. So what does that mean? What it means is if you don't have process, if you don't have procedures, if you don't have clarity as to who's supposed to do what and when and how, the likelihood that you're going to get consistency is almost zero. So communication is not only articulating in clear form what you write and what you say, but also having a very clean, consistent process so that everybody understands what is expected and how it is to be done. And that doesn't have to be complicated. Actually, it shouldn't be complicated. But most young businesses have never bothered to do that.
For sure. And then, those young businesses start to grow, and then it's kind of too late at that point.
Well, it's
I'm
like
not
a
going to say
garden at
too
that
late,
point
but
that has all kinds of weeds in it. It's just,
right.
it could have been a beautiful garden, but it's just got dandelions coming up all over.
Right. Yes, sir. Exactly. Exactly. Um, so one of the problems that I face is time management. I tend to like to spend time in the business doing what I think is fun and what I like. And that can sometimes come back to bite you if you're not effectively managing or using your time. So what would you say is the secret of effective time management?
At the end of the prior day or first thing that morning, you need to sit down. I need to sit down. We all need to sit down and quietly plan our day. And and quite honestly, it is actually very rewarding because when you slow your mental thought process down and you really think about, well, what is it I really need to do? It becomes much less frustrating than if you're just being reactive. And if we're all being reactive, and it's pretty easy for me to do that as well. I'm not sitting here trying to sound like I have completely mastered this, but but I have been blessed in that I get up obscenely early, and I've always enjoyed it. Probably because I grew up on a dairy farm where dairy farmers get up very early, and so I learned that habit at a young age. But I have quiet time for prayer and reflection and organization, and I prioritize my day. And one of the techniques I learned from a couple of different authors is, first of all, write down the three most important things you need to get done. Don't commingle them with your laundry list of everything. Like, I need to swing by and pick up my shirts at the laundry. I need to drop my car off to get the oil changed. All of those things are interesting and important, but what are the three actual tasks that I truly have to get done today? And rank them number one, two, and three. And then have a separate list of all the other stuff, like swing by and pick up a birthday card, whatever. Those are things you need to get to, but they need to be subservient to your list of top three priorities. So I think that's number one, is really thinking through whether it's the night before. And I know several of my friends and colleagues believe that the night before is best for them and whatever works is great. The other part is we've all gotten really sloppy at being controlled by our electronic devices. So, a couple of tips there. Number one is to turn off all of your dings, bings, bangs, and gongs, and either just shut your phone off entirely or put it in another room. Turn off all of your incoming messaging on your computer and recognize that you're only going to do that at scheduled times during the day. Otherwise, your thought process is going to be continuously broken. And in fact, I don't know the precise number, but I was reading something even the other day where this author said that for every interruption you have, it takes you between 15 and 20 minutes to get back up to speed. So if you were working on a client's account and you jump off and you go over and you read your emails and respond to your email, the thought being that it's going to take you the better part of 15 to 20 minutes to actually get back up to speed. And that's assuming, of course, it's something that has a real cerebral thought process behind it. It's not some simple little task. And I think we all are all guilty of that. So controlling your day, and by meaning your text messaging, your email, saying to people, as an example, and I don't think this is rude, I answer my email twice. I check my email twice a day. So if they need an instant response, let them know that unless it's a bona fide emergency, you're probably not going to see their email until maybe noon or 1 o'clock. So that's a tip that I think is really important and works pretty effectively. Another is to have an agreement with your colleagues in your office that if your door is shut or your head is down at your workstation, you could even go so far as to even put a red label on your computer screen, or a card above your computer that just says, "Hey, when you walk by my office and you see I've got this red card on my screen or above my screen, it means I'm in quiet time, and I need undisturbed time, and correspondingly, you would respect your colleague. So I think that being mindful, maybe this is the word, intentional. Being intentional about how you manage your time will go a long ways toward increasing your productivity.
For sure. And that's definitely one of my pitfalls too, kind of getting distracted by my phone and all this technology going on. So I agree with that statement 1000%. You know, technology has made us sloppy in a way and shorten our attention span for sure.
Well, see, we've also deluded ourselves into thinking, and I'm guilty of this as well, that we can do that and it comes at no price. I can just kind of I can do these two or three things all at the same time. Yeah, you can chew gum and walk at the same time. Those two are compatible, but you can't be in a webinar as an example and really learning from the webinar and reading your phone. The two don't mix. I mean, you'll come, and I've done this myself. You come to the end of the webinar and you've been looking at your phone and your emails, and I've retained very little of what the speaker had to say. But I deluded myself at the moment that I was doing both.
For sure. For sure. No, and I totally agree. Um, and you've been in business and been running business for decades, and you managed over 800 employees. Um, so what would you say is the importance of having a good team? And how would you say that your network has helped to benefit you, and to kind of land you where you are today?
I think I may have lost you, Wesley. This looks like the screen has frozen, but I'll that question.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So
First of
the
all, you can't do anything beyond a very limited amount of work all on your own. It requires a team. And what's interesting, I was reading not long ago that we talk oftentimes about team. Oh, we're all on the same team. But many organizations aren't teams at all. They're just individuals that are all working for the same company. And therein lies the difference between people who are all just co-workers and people who are actually on the same team. I think that it's Patrick Lencioni who said, again, I'll probably slaughter this statement, but essentially what he was saying is if you could get everybody on the same team, rowing in the same direction at the same speed at the same time, you could beat any competition hands down. And there's a lot of truth to that. Rowing a boat, my son was on a rowing team. And so as a result, I became somewhat a little bit aware. I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert, but a little bit aware of how absolutely precise everybody on a rowing team has to put their oar in the water and pull at the same speed and lift the oar back out and back in, and in nanoseconds of difference in effort and pull and speed, you will absolutely not win a race. So when it comes to team, it really is the difference between, are we a team? Are we all sharing the same values? Do we have the same attitudes? Do we have the same vision? Are we all focused and energized and truly functioning like a basketball team or a football team? Or are we all people just showing up here on the field, kind of milling around? We all happen to have the same jersey on, but we're not really acting like a team. But back to your original question, what's the importance of a team? Unless a person wants to do all the work themselves, your ability to multiply your capabilities and outcomes is totally dependent on creating an effective and energized team.
For sure, for sure, and that's definitely a great piece of advice and a great example. Um, you know, I guess the more in sync your team is, the more on the same page they are and kind of thinking on that same wavelength, the more effective and productive, that team can be.
It really I read another quote the other day, which I think is also true, and that is because not unlike a football team or a basketball team, you really want to have excellent performers. And I was reading this quote that says, "Never forget, a really really good person can do the work of three people." So what does that mean? It means that you need to have an environment that will attract and retain really good people. And people do not want to stay as a part of an organization where there is a sense of fracture and tension and disharmony. But when you can get really good people in an environment where they recognize that they're all rowing in the same direction, everyone not only has individually much greater productivity, but it's a heck of a lot more fun.
Yes, sir. 100%. 100%. So, with your extensive background in business and running different companies, what would you say are some of, the common business mistakes that you've seen or that you've made yourself that you wish you could have avoided? And, what did you learn from those mistakes?
One of the biggest challenges that you're going to hear from anyone in business, myself included, is, well, I just have a hard time holding people accountable. When you peel back the onion, though, much of the time, the reason it's been difficult to hold people accountable is I and others have not defined what success looks like. We've not clearly defined what it is we actually expect someone to produce. And so, let me use a real corny example. If I wanted someone to cut, split, and stack 6 cords of wood, it would be really important for me to say to someone, by the end of the day, I need you to fall this tree, cut it into 18 or 24-inch lengths, split it, and stack it. That's real specific. And so if I came back at the end of the day and it wasn't 6 cords, but it was only 2 cords, then I could say, well, gosh, I'm really disappointed because you've really fallen short of the mark. That's a very clear example of where the expectation was clearly explained and the outcome at the end of the day fell short of that. And it's really easy in that example to say to someone, you fell short. In a professional environment, however, much of the time we don't define that. We just say to someone, well, we want you to do a good job, or we want you to take care of the customers, or we want you to handle the sales department. But we've never actually said what their roles and responsibilities are. We've not really clearly defined what success looks like. And yet at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, we're not happy. Well, why are we not happy? In large part, it's because we never communicated with clarity what it was we wanted. And so that is actually a shortcoming I've had, I believe, in my career, is thinking that somehow I understood what good looked like, and that no doubt the other person understood what good looked like, but not taking the time to actually sit down and make sure that there's a meeting of the minds as to what it is we both want to try to accomplish, when it's going to be done, and what it's going to look like.
For sure. And I think that's a problem that um everybody faces or has faced at some point in time. You kind of just start moving so fast and doing so many things, you forget to kind of sit down and take the time to really explain, like you said, your vision and the idea that you have for your company, or the goal that it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yep. Well, that's an example of moving too fast and not being clear as to, and again, it goes back to that statement earlier on about a large part of disappointment comes from a lack of communicating expectations.
Yes, sir, for sure, for sure. Um, so what would you say is your favorite part about being an entrepreneur?
Being an entrepreneur has understandably lots of stresses. Nothing in life is certain when you're an entrepreneur. And it's probably the dream, it's the potential, it's the opportunity to be creative, the sense that you are in control of your own destiny, although that's a little bit of a head fake because uh, we only control a small part of our destiny. Um, but if you're an individual who doesn't want to be feel like you're being bridled or controlled or told what to do, first of all, I can tell you as an entrepreneur, you're going to work far harder than any employee ever dreamed of working, because much of the time, myself included, you're going to work 3 times as hard, and you're probably going to go without a paycheck for some extended period of time. Being an entrepreneur is not necessarily by any means an easy or quick trip to riches. Far from it. But I do think the attraction is the idea that you have your liberty to be creative and energized, and also, um, and in no small part, it's very gratifying to know you're creating employment for other people, and hopefully creating a good company that provides good jobs that people are enthusiastic about.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, how would you define success as an entrepreneur?
Well, there's all kinds of forms of all kinds of different ways to measure that. Um, First of all, if you were to step back and look at it in a holistic way, you really have to say, did we fulfill our purpose? What is your purpose? Why were you in business? I love the book by Simon Sinek called Start with the Why. We all talk about, it's easy to describe what it is we do, and how we do it. But the more important question is, why do we do it? And the why has to be more than, well, isn't it obvious? I want to make some money. No, that's pretty shallow. That really isn't a huge motivator. In the last company I was in, which was a healthcare company, we took care of people who suffer from Alzheimer's. And so when we first started out, before I'd read the book Start with the Why by Simon Sinek, um, we had, sort of the pro forma uh, purpose statement, mission statement that sounds very corporate, that is not memorable and is probably way too long. But after reading that book, Start with the Why, I recognized that we really did have a why. And the why was, and we got it down to a sentence that was memorable, because if it isn't short and memorable, and repeatable, it probably isn't worth anything. So our purpose statement was to protect, engage, and love people living with memory loss. And so, what was interesting about that is, you might think, first of all, well, to protect, engage, and love people living with memory loss is talking strictly about the residents. But in fact, it is to protect, engage, and love not only the residents, but the residents' families and the employees. All of those, if you will, populations or groups are living with memory loss, whether you're the resident themselves, perhaps even more importantly, the family members who are oftentimes emotionally impacted by the disease even more than the resident themselves, because they're in a grieving period. And then the employees who really, I must tell you, fall in love with these individuals when they're caring for them, and then they pass. So it's a very tough arrangement where you are expected as a caregiver to provide the love and the care for this individual, but then within a year or two or less, they pass. So that was our why. And and obviously it's a sensitive purpose because we're caring for older people who are going through an end of life condition. But I do believe that while that propelled us, every business needs to step back and say, so really, why are we in business? Are we in business to make children's lives better? Are we in, how are we going to benefit our customer? What is our underlying emotional motivator? And that is in every business worth anything has a why, but you have to step back and really dig to figure out what it is and then tap into that energy and use that as your anchor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I definitely agree with that 1000%. And I also think um, that's an important piece too, to realize maybe you don't fully understand or fully know your why when you're starting or when you're, just getting started, but that why will be what motivates you to keep going and to not stop. So I feel like it's very important for business owners and anyone really to stop and ask themselves what is their why and why are they doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's really the foundation of your business. Um, it's really what is going to anchor you and motivate you when you're going through the tough periods. And every business has its tough periods. I mean, if anybody thought that they were exempt or that most businesses were exempt from tough periods, just look back at COVID-19. There were businesses that had been around for decades that in a matter of days or weeks were completely upended. So, yes, new businesses, young businesses, construction related businesses, some of those go up and down pretty regularly, and other businesses seem to be pretty stable, but nobody is exempt from tough periods. And it's that core purpose, the why, that is going to sustain you when you're going through that type of difficult time.
How would you like for people to remember you and your company?
You're talking about which company now? The last one that was the healthcare company or my current organization?
Your current organization.
Okay. Well, I would like to think that in working with clients, I'm able to help them focus. I'm able to help them clarify. I'm able to help them regain life balance. Many entrepreneurs are, well, they're just actually overwhelmed. When they start, in fact, that's typically when I get involved, is they started out this dream business and it was fun when they got started and they sold some product and hired an employee and then they sold some more product and they hired another employee. Now they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years into it and maybe they're selling $4 or $5 million a year in volume. And they stop one day and think, wow, I've never pedaled this hard. I thought back when we started out that first 6 months to a year was the tough period. No cash flow and nobody knew us. Now we've been in business for 5 or 6 years and we're actually selling $5 million this year. And I have never worked so hard in my life. Why is that? And the reality is it's because they've never put systems or processes in place. And now things are really, frankly, in a form of dysfunction. And so, what I would like to think is I help them bring some order, bring some simplicity, help them reduce anxiety and chaos. And I don't say that to sound goody two shoes or to make it sound like I personally work miracles, because I don't. But I can help individuals step back and recognize that there are some fundamental shifts that they can go through that are that will be transformational. An example would be just to get good news and bad news. One of the things I always do with every prospective client is give them an organizational assessment. And it's 25 questions, and each question has a score of 0 to 4. And I just say, answer these questions. Just walk through them, just judge them yourself. An example would be, do we have regular meetings with an agenda, with a stated purpose, blah, 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 blah. And so they're all kind of just very straightforward kinds of questions that every healthy business ought to be following. I will tell you, when I took the test myself 5, 6 years ago, I am embarrassed to admit my score was probably 25 out of 100. Not a good score. And when most of my clients take the test, they correspondingly are also 25 or 30. So I'm quick to explain to them, the bad news is you're currently 25. The good news is if you follow these various steps within a couple of years, you can be at 80 or 85. There's no magic here. It's just this becomes the roadmap. You're not where you want to be today. You've now identified that. Just think of how much better your life is going to be when you go from a score of 25 to 80. You will now be a business, or you will then be a business that is an 8-cylinder engine hitting on all 8 cylinders. So it's bad news, good news. Doesn't feel good today to be told you have a score of 25. But the good news is you don't have to stay there. There is a road out of this. And you can, in fact, true story. My business coach was talking to one of his dear friends, and he said, "So how's it going?" And he said, "Oh, I'm actually a little bored." And my friend said, "Bored? Why are you bored?" He said, "Well, quite honestly, about 3 years ago, we implemented an operating system in our business, EOS." And he said, "Things are going well enough now. I really have kind of worked my way out of a job. And I know from time to time I'm tempted to step back in, but I just screw it up." That is a true life story of an entrepreneur who was working frantically, but then had presence of mind to say, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And so they implemented an operating system that allowed them to get their stuff in order and start running like a machine rather than a Saturday bazaar. And that is when an entrepreneur can actually say, I may actually be a little bit bored, but it's only because I'm no longer constantly fighting fire drills.
And there's got to be an amazing place and a space to be able to get to in your business.
And every business can get there. Seriously, every business can get there. And one of the most gratifying parts of this is hearing a client after a year. In fact, I just had a session, all day session, not last Friday. And unsolicited comments from several of the participants in the leadership team just said, "Oh gosh, we've made so much progress this last year." And then they started articulating the various things that they have, kind of breakthroughs. And they're not earth shattering kind of things, but from their standpoint, they're just feeling so much more at peace, so much more organized, knowing who's on first, who's on second, who's pitching, who's catching. And unless you clarify who's catching and who's pitching, uh, nobody really knows when they go to the start of the game. Well, are you pitching today or are you catching? Are you batting? Very simple stuff. So that's the good news. With commitment and focus and some help, virtually any business can dramatically improve their performance.
That's awesome. Mark, I definitely want to thank you for your time today. You've given us so much wisdom throughout this episode, and definitely um, information to think on and to contemplate on and meditate on and to apply to our lives and to our businesses. So I appreciate you for your time today, and your insight. But before we go, at the end of every episode we like to play a rapid fire question game. So if you're willing to play, I'll go ahead and get started and ask.
Well, you can ask the rapid fire questions. I don't know if I'll have rapid fire answers, but I'll do my best.
Yes, sir. Look, that's all we ask is just to do your best. All right. So, question number one: where's your favorite place to travel?
Oh gosh, my favorite place to travel, I think Italy. Italy is just a wonderful country, and Rome is just a great city to. You start out in Rome, and your head will burst in about 3 days because you'll absorb so much history, and then you have to get in a car or on a bus and go up to Tuscany and relax. So yeah, I would say Italy.
Nice, nice. Okay, so question number two. What song explains your life the most?
Oh man, that's a stumper. I'm not very good at song titles, so I'm going to have to pass on that one because I don't know that I'd even have a song that explains my life.
No problem, no problem. And look, the final question. What's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
An amazing thing that I did that no one was around to see. Gosh, I don't know that I've ever done anything amazing. Um, well, there's got to be something that would make my grandma proud. It something amazing I did that no one was around to see. I am absolutely drawing a blank. It's probably something I did for my wife because I love surprising my wife and getting her little gifts that she's not expecting. But of course, it's not it's not a secret when she gets it. So I don't think that that really answers your question. But it would have to be something that I did for my wife that she didn't see me do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Mark, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you, and likewise. And I do hope we have a chance to visit again.
Yes, sir.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.